you know there was a man who people believed could not feel pain, a man who was whipped until the flesh tore, yet never screamed, shot, yet kept moving, broken, yet never bowed. They called him something far more terrifying than human. And the story you're about to hear is not just about survival. It's about something darker, something that made even his masters afraid of him. Because in the swamps of Louisiana, fear didn't belong to the slaves. For once, it belonged to the ones holding the whip. Welcome back to Night Archive. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Because the stories you hear here are not told anywhere else. And this one only gets darker from here. Louisiana, early 1800s. The air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. The kind of heat that clings to your skin and refuses to let go. The plantations stretched endlessly, fields soaked not just in sweat, but in silence. Because silence was survival. On one of those plantations, whispers began to spread about a man. Not a loud man, not a rebellious man, but a man who simply didn't react. His name was never clearly recorded. Some called him Isaac. Others refused to call him anything at all. But everyone agreed on one thing. He felt no pain. At first, it sounded like nonsense. Stories slaves told each other to survive the night. But then, something happened that made even the overseers uneasy. One afternoon, under the burning sun, he was accused of working too slowly. That alone was enough. The overseer raised the whip. The first strike landed hard across his back. Flesh split open instantly. Most men would scream. Most men would fall. He didn't. He stood still. The second strike came harder, then a third, then 10. Still nothing. No scream, no cry, no plea. Just silence. The overseer stopped. Not because he was tired, but because something felt wrong. Because it wasn't normal. The other slaves stopped working, quietly watching. And in that moment, something shifted. Because pain was control. And if pain didn't work, then what did? The story spread fast. Faster than the wind through the fields. At night, around dim candlelight, people whispered about him. Some believed he was chosen. Others believed he was cursed. But one thing became clear. He was different. And difference was dangerous. Days passed. Weeks. They tested him again. This time, it wasn't just punishment. It was curiosity. They burned his arm with heated metal. The smell of flesh filled the air. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. One of the men stepped back, his hands shaking slightly, because now it wasn't just strange, it was terrifying. You see, in a world built on breaking people, what do you do with someone who cannot be broken? That question started to haunt them. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because his silence didn't mean he was empty. It meant something else was building. something no one understood yet. At night, he would sit alone, not speaking, not reacting, just watching, always watching. Some slaves avoided him, others stayed close, because even though he said nothing, there was something in his eyes, not fear, not pain, something colder, something patient. And patience, in a place like that, was more dangerous than anger. One night, a young slave asked him quietly, "Does it not hurt?" He looked at him, and for the first time he spoke. "It does," the boy froze. Because if it hurt, then why didn't he react? He didn't explain. He didn't need to, because the truth was worse. He wasn't free from pain. He had just learned to live inside it. And once you do, that pain stops controlling you. Now imagine how terrifying that is to the people who rely on it. The plantation owner heard about him. At first, he dismissed it. But then the overseers insisted, so he decided to see it himself. They brought him forward. The owner studied him carefully, like he wasn't a man, but something else. "Show me," he said. The whip came again. Harder this time. Strike after strike. Blood ran down his back. Still nothing. The owner's face changed, because this wasn't defiance. This wasn't bravery. This was something else entirely. Something that didn't belong. And that's when fear began to grow, not in the fields, but in the house. Because if one man could resist pain, others might follow. And if fear disappears, control disappears with it. They couldn't allow that. So they tried something else. Isolation. They locked him away. Days without food, without light. A place designed to break the mind. Because even if the body doesn't break, the mind always does. Or at least, that's what they believed. Days turned into weeks. When they finally opened the door, they expected a different man, a broken man. But what they saw instead made things worse. He walked out slowly, weak but steady. And when he looked at them, there was something new in his eyes. Not pain, not fear, understanding. As if he had seen something in that darkness and brought it back with him. From that moment on, people stopped calling him a man. Because whatever he had become, it wasn't something they understood anymore. And fear of the unknown is the strongest kind of fear. Then came the incident that sealed his legend. One evening during transport, chaos broke out. A struggle, a fight. A gun was fired. The bullet hit him. Clean, direct. He fell. Everything went silent. Even the air seemed to stop. But then he moved. Slowly, deliberately, he stood up. The wound bleeding heavily, yet he kept walking. No panic, no scream, just movement, like nothing had happened. That was the moment when fear fully changed sides. Because now, even the men with guns weren't sure anymore. And when power starts to doubt itself, it begins to crack. After that, they kept him under constant watch. Not because he was dangerous, but because they didn't understand him. And what we don't understand, we fear. But here's where the story becomes something deeper, because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what he represented. Other slaves started to change, not loudly, not openly, but inside. Because if one man could endure, then maybe, just maybe, they could too. And that idea was more dangerous than any rebellion, because it couldn't be seen, it couldn't be punished, it couldn't be stopped. The owner realized this too late, because by the time fear disappears, control is already gone. No chains can hold a mind that no longer obeys fear. And that's when the story begins to fade into legend. Because one night he disappeared. No struggle, no trace, no body, just gone. Some said he escaped into the swamps. Others said something took him. But those who saw him last said something different. They said he walked away like a man who was finally free, not from chains, but from something deeper, from fear itself. And that's what makes this story so unsettling, because it forces a question. What is more powerful, the ability to avoid pain or the ability to endure it completely? And if fear is the tool of control, what happens when it stops working? Maybe that's why this story still survives, because it's not just about the past. It's about something inside every human being, something waiting, something quiet, something that, once awakened, can never be controlled again. And maybe that's what they were truly afraid of. If this story made you think or gave you chills, take a moment to comment what you believe really happened to him, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this, they don't just stay in history, they stay with you.